we're going to talk about change and hacking your brain to, thank you so much, hacking your brain to react differently, potentially, to change. These two gentlemen, do you know them? Vinod Khosla, very famous venture capitalist in the Bay Area, and that is George Bell, the former CEO of Excite.com. You remember Excite.com? These guys had the opportunity to purchase Google 1 million times cheaper than it is today. They did not take that opportunity. They missed it. What would the world have been like if they had? These two gentlemen are unfortunately homeless. They also happen to be Harvard graduates. Harvard graduates. Notice I didn't say Stanford. And these two guys, Nobel Prize laureates, they are John Bell and Einstein, of course. They both won the Nobel Prize in physics, but they were also both dead wrong about quantum mechanics. Most people don't realize this, but Einstein actually died not realizing his key flaw. The point here is that our assumptions about how much mileage we get out of IQ seem to be challenged. Recent research has pointed to evidence that beyond the first 2 years on the job, IQ does not seem to predict success. Does not seem to predict success. And in fact, another body of work is pointing to the fact that in 70% of cases, folks with average intelligence outperform those with extremely high intelligence. So if IQ is not the answer, what are we missing? With a group of researchers, I have come up with the concept of AQ, for adaptability quotient. If the world is changing exponentially fast, then your ability to respond to that change is the strongest predictor of your success. So let's talk about this. It seems pretty intuitive. There are 3 components to adaptive behavior. First is perception. You need to receive the information. You need to understand the world. Second is conception. You need to make sense of the world. You need to have a mental model, a causal model of what is leading to what. And finally, and most importantly, you need to translate it into action. So perception, conception, and action. Pretty straightforward, right? We're going to watch a video. Don't be alarmed. It's a bit loud, but have a look. How many people have driven at 100 miles an hour? Let's see a show of hands. Keep those hands up. 110, 120, 130, 140 miles an hour, 145, 150 miles an hour. Great to have you guys with us. Glad you survived that. This gentleman is going 150 miles an hour. That's 240 kilometers an hour. Do you really believe he has time to go perception, conception, action? No, there is no time for that. What he is engaged in is something we call concept bypass. So the 3 steps, perception, conception, and action, when there's not enough time, you go on autopilot and you jump straight from perception to action. This is the result of practice, a ton of practice. And it's fantastic for avoiding car accidents. The problem is, this is typically how we run our organizations. This is how we respond to change. And that's exactly what I want to unpack with you guys. I want to show you an example of type 2 adaptability, proper adaptability that goes through all 3 steps. Here's a question for you. You are the CEO of a company that is contemplating an acquisition. Would you pay $1.65 billion for a company that has no profits, is dealing with multiple lawsuits, and is not related to your core business? Would you do that? Probably not. Probably not. But that's exactly what Google did in purchasing YouTube. Not many people realize this, but at the time when the purchase was made, YouTube had no profits. They were dealing with copyright infringement lawsuits, and the core business had nothing to do with it, with Google's core business. Perception, conception, and action. First and foremost, Google had the privileged opportunity to notice that there was a ton of traffic going to YouTube. So there was something about their opportunity to have exceptional perception. And then that was not enough. They had the intelligence and the adaptability to challenge their models of how the world worked. Remember back in the day when this happened, there was no video streaming that we had replaced TV with. This is really at the beginning of that era. And most importantly, they went back to the board and they made the case to spend $1.65 billion. The action step is often the toughest, right? Because there's cost-benefit analysis. And they did that. So now let's talk about, this seems all straightforward, right? We should be able to behave with high AQ after this session. That is the goal. But there are things in our brains that prevent us from behaving adaptively. So let's talk about perception, conception, and action blocks, things that block adaptive behavior. I would like for you to look at this image for a couple of seconds. And how many people see the green spiral? All right, so if I don't see a hand, what does that mean? Help me interpret that. Great. How many people see the blue spirals? Wonderful. How many people believe they are the same color? They are, in fact, the same color. I have won many bets based on this image. Let me show you. If you zoom in, they are, in fact, the same thing, green and blue. So this is an example of your brain rejecting evidence that is right in front of you. Simply saying, no way. That green and that blue are not the same. Here's another example. If you were to Google the phrase, the world's best guitar player, this page shows up, and then you click on the first result. I'm not sure why I wore a tie that day, but I did, and trying to look cool. So this is me. There was a talent show. Somebody posted a video on YouTube called it The World's Best Guitar Player. Let me be very clear. I am not the world's best guitar player. Most likely, I am not the best guitar player in this room. But I want to share a secret with you guys. 60 million views. And please don't share this outside this room. Of the 60 million, around 59.5 million is my mom. It's true. It's true. All right, let's have a look at the video. What? Anyways, how many people saw the fire? Great, wonderful. You guys are paying attention. So we've done a study, and less than 10% of people see the fire. There is, in fact, fire in the video. Here it is. And this is interesting because your brain is saying, fire, guitar, I don't think so. They don't go together. So this is top-down processing. Basically, your brain is blocking evidence that is hitting your brain, but it's rejecting it. So perception is not failing, conception is failing, because it doesn't work with the causal model of your brain. And if you want to ask me how you put a guitar on fire, if you play any instrument fast enough, how many circles do you guys see in this image? Has everybody, what? Has everybody seen the circles? Here they are. Wonderful. It doesn't help. The circles are still missing, so let's try that again. Another example, in this case, perception is blocked because of the neurons in your brain. But if you were to take this one step further, and this has been well studied in neuroscience, there's a thing called the Einstellung Effect. And this is very well established in chess. So what you do is you bring a bunch of professional and amateur chess players, you bring them into the lab, and you tell them about this 5-move strategy. You teach them a new 5-move strategy. And then you show them many boards, many chess boards, and you let them practice. And then you start showing them new chess boards, and they keep applying the 5-move strategy. It works, it's wonderful. And then you show them this board. The pink dot is tracking their eye movement. What you'll notice is the person keeps scanning the top left corner. That's where the 5-move strategy typically works. But what is special about this chessboard is that there is a 3-move strategy at the bottom. Faster, more efficient, and it is guaranteed to win. What I love about this example is people are not even looking where they should be looking. And the Einstellung Effect is where you apply previously successful strategies to new problems. A great example of your past success getting in the way. Your past success is getting in the way. Everybody's familiar with Netflix and Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster today, of course, bankrupt. Netflix, I believe, is worth around $50 billion. What many people don't realize is that Blockbuster had not 1, not 2, but 3 opportunities to purchase Netflix. And they missed every single one of them. In fact, first one, they laughed them out of the office. In retrospect, it is easy to judge the CEO of Blockbuster and say, wow, lack of competence. But there's more to the story. At that first opportunity that Blockbuster had for purchasing Netflix, the CEO of Blockbuster was going to bed, waking up, and a new store had opened somewhere in the world. Do you really believe, if you are the CEO of such a successful company, you are prepared to challenge your assumptions about how the world works? Are you prepared to revisit everything you hold to be true and the cause of your success? This is the problem. This is the challenge. So they could have bought it for $50 million. Today is a $50 billion company. One of my favorite quotes, faced with the choice between changing one's mind and proving that there is no need to do so, almost everyone gets busy on the proof. This is true of our professional lives and, sadly, of our personal lives as well. Does anybody have one of these? The exit is over there. No, shameless joke. If you do have it, enjoy it while it lasts. What is fascinating about Blackberry is their stock price peaked. Anybody know when? Anybody know what happened in that year? The iPhone was launched. And a lot of people have asked the question, why didn't Blackberry switch to the iPhone model? They had the technology for a touch screen. They could have gotten rid of the keyboard. The truth is, there are internal memos at Blackberry where people were talking about this. Why could they not pivot? Everybody loved the keyboard so much. They were worried about alienating their current base, right? The current customer base. It is very hard to pivot when you are successful, which is a warning to all of us. You wouldn't be here if you weren't successful. And understanding how your past success is getting in the way is probably the most important takeaway from the entire conference. And the headline for organizations is really that cash cows, your cash cows, are getting in the way of you going places. So understand how to separate them, and you're well on your way to high AQ operations. I want to share an anecdote with you from our research. When we bring people into the lab and we tell them we're going to measure their adaptability, what do you think happens? They start behaving very adaptively, which is very annoying because we're trying to measure the damn thing, right? But it is also good news for humanity. It means that unlike IQ, AQ seems to be highly coachable. It means that you should never fire somebody who you perceive to have low AQ. You should invest in them. You should embrace them and give them the tools. So I want to share some anecdotes with you from our research, and I do believe that every organization needs to have a chief adaptability officer. You don't need to call them a CAO or a cow. You can call them whatever you want, but there are three key functions that this person should perform. Number one is to amplify perceptions. The surface area of your organization is larger than you think, and your team members are scanning the world very proactively throughout their days. But the problem is perceptions are not amplified. Perceptions are often silenced, especially when they challenge common conceptions. Which brings up the second point, sharing conceptions, creating an environment, a safe environment where you can share what you think about how the world works, even if that vision is very different than the status quo. If you were to reflect on your organization, there are as many versions of your organizations as there are people in your organizations. There are many conceptions of how we run our companies, our organizations. At the same time, there's often a dominant narrative, and that dominant narrative is what gets in the way of adaptive behavior. And finally, rewarding actions. Notice I didn't say rewarding outcomes. Typically, we reward outcomes. But rewarding actions is very different. Let me share an anecdote with you. I manage a small hedge fund. Every time I bring a new trader into the fund, I've noticed that if I tell them, show me that your hit rate is going up, that over time you are performing better and better, what do you think happens? They become very risk averse. They become worried about their hit rate, and they stop taking risks. So what we do instead is we scan for IQ and AQ and of course EQ, but once people are within the organization, we ask them to show us that they're taking action. We don't ask for demonstrated outcomes. That part will figure itself out. By rewarding action, you're encouraging experimentation. And the cost to running experimentations have dropped exponentially. This is a key message of the conference. So thinking about these three in your own world is a key stepping stone towards AQ. I also want to emphasize the need for diversification of your teams, both for professional decisions and also personal decisions. Diverse teams fail diversely. So we could take inspiration from finance and diversify the risk by having teams that think differently. Bring that person in who has a very weird way of getting stuff done. That's a good thing. That is a good thing. There's also another concept that I want to share with you. I've done a quick TED Talk on this. I call this ligometry. Ligo is Latin for shadow. Metry is quantification. What I'm referring to here is knowledge of lack of knowledge. We'll live in a world where there's knowledge pretension. One of the last things you would want to do at your workplace is to acknowledge the things that you know you don't know. It's kind of a career-ending move, right? It's very uncool to talk about your open questions. And as a result, we have knowledge pretension. We push the things that are open questions, we push them to the background. So the idea here is, think about a circle. Inside the circle is everything you know. Outside the circle is everything you don't know. The edge of the circle are the open questions. And people with high AQ, we have noticed, tend to focus on the edge of the circle. They're comfortable with the unknowns, the things they know they don't know. All right, I want to demonstrate this with a practical example. I'm going to show you a quiz. It's a fun little thing. I'm going to give you around 15 seconds. I want you to read the question. There are 3 multiple choice answers, and then we'll compare notes. Ready? All right. All right, how many people believe the answer is A? B? C? Great, the answer is A. Very few people get this right the first time. Let's have a look at it. Is a married person looking at an unmarried person? The thing we know we don't know is whether Anne is married or not, right? But your brain likes to push the unknown, the open question, to the background. We enjoy working with things that are confirmed as opposed to things that are unconfirmed. So you end up not utilizing the fact that you don't know about Anne's status. But if you do, let's go through this ligometric process. Two possibilities. Anne is married, in which case she is looking at George, or Anne is unmarried, in which case Jack is looking at Anne. So the answer is yes. A married person is looking at an unmarried person. The fastest way to solve this problem is through this ligometric process, where you're amplifying the thing you know you don't know, as opposed to pushing it to the background, which is the more comfortable thing to do. Acknowledging the things we know we don't know tends to create cognitive dissonance. It's uncomfortable. In our research, we've also found that every organization out there, regardless of the type of institution you are, everybody's looking for stability. But the strongest predictor of stability seems to be your ability to unlearn. Unlearning is emerging as a core competency. The things that made you successful in the past are the very things that might be preventing you from adaptive behavior, perception, conception, and action. And because the pace of change is accelerating, the key message of singularity, exponential change, then your ability to unlearn is as important as your ability to learn new things. I want you to be intentional about this, focused, frequently ask yourself, what are the things that we need to unlearn now? I want to demonstrate unlearning with a very concrete example. It is very easy, I've noticed in working with executives, I've noticed that it is very easy to become prescriptive about asking your team to go and unlearn stuff. Go and be an unlearner today. Unlearning is extremely difficult. Case in point, somebody created a bicycle that turns left when you turn the handle right. Okay? They created this bicycle, and have a look. It's very, very counterintuitive. The gentleman on the right, Destin Sandlin, is running this experiment where he's asking people to come on stage and try to ride the bicycle for 10 feet, 3 meters, in exchange for $200. And nobody can do it. Nobody can do it. It's extremely, extremely difficult. And it's so fun to watch. Why is it so fun to watch other people fail? I don't know, but it's a thing. Now, he did, Destin, he did train himself to ride this bike. How long do you think it took him? Let's hear some numbers. I would love to hear some numbers. All right, I heard all the way from 2 hours to 3 months, a week, 1 day. Yeah, that's a typical answer. That's a lot of time committed, 3 weeks. It took him 8 months. On average, 45 minutes a day to be able to do this. I think he's under 40. And even then, the smallest noise would distract him. He also taught his son, who I believe was 5 at the time. How long do you think it took the son? 2 weeks. It took the son 2 weeks. And it's fascinating. Now, he did try to, so the reason I share this is for all of us to approach unlearning with tremendous sympathy and hopefully empathy. Unlearning is extremely difficult. Our brains are not wired for unlearning. Our brains are wired for learning and over-anchoring. Now, this guy tried to get back on a regular bike. Have a look. He relearned it in 2 days, actually, from what I heard. So we also need to talk about the motivation for adaptability. You can't have adaptive behavior without a beacon of guidance. And fear is often a great motivator to make sure perception, conception, and action do take place instead of the concept bypass, which takes you from perception to action. Fear. Not this type of fear, though. So this is Annabella, a cheetah that I met in South Africa. For some reason, Annabella really liked to lick my hand. and I learned later that this is what cheetahs do before they take a bite. Thankfully, I didn't know that at the time. But this is a very real fear. And when you ask folks to behave innovatively, this is what it feels like. Innovation, thinking creatively, change, is very sexy, right? It looks very courageous. It looks great. But at any point in time, it could bite you. It could bite you. So as leaders, it is very important for all of us to approach this mandate of innovation from our teams very sympathetically, very empathetically, to know that the cost-benefit analysis is always taking place, right? The benefit of innovation and behaving adaptively is extremely high, but the cost could potentially be extremely higher, which is the sole reason. The cost-benefit analysis is why people don't behave adaptively. Quite often, it's the action state that prevents them. So as leaders, and I'm taking leadership to apply to self-leadership as well, our challenge is to take this type of fear, which is vehement, which is very real, and turn it into another type of fear. Here's what I mean. Anybody know where this is? It is the Louvre. So this is the loneliest place at the Louvre Museum in Paris. I was randomly standing there, and every moment I looked up, it was of people. I saw people walking away from the wall. Nobody was walking towards the wall. Nobody was looking at the 5 beautiful paintings on this wall. I actually started taking pictures because this was so weird, which begged the question, what is on the other side? 300 people are on the other side, and they're all trying to catch a glimpse of Da Vinci's masterpiece, the Mona Lisa. The wall epitomizes a type of fear that we all feel. It's the question of, where will you end up? Will your work matter? Is what you're working on today, is what you're focusing on today, is it going to stand the test of time? Which side of the wall will you be on? And it's not about fame, fortune, or anything like that. It's about beauty. It's about the caliber of our work. It's about pride of ownership. So ultimately, I do believe, guided by this type of fear, we all have a shot at having extremely high AQs. It comes down to one question for me. 1 year from today, what project will you regret not starting? I want you to reflect on that and think about next year when you hopefully come back to the conference. Will you have answered this question the way you wished? I want to end with my favorite quote. Intelligence is hitting a target that nobody else can. Genius is hitting a target that nobody else can see. And with that, thank you so much.